I used to believe there was nothing more beautiful than the quiet chaos of my little family. I woke every morning to the soft snore of my husband beside me, the sunlight pressing through the curtains, and the certainty that I was loved, safe, and exactly where I was meant to be. My entire world centered around the two people I adored most, my husband, with his calm smile and gentle promises, and my son, whose first cry had stitched new purpose into my tired heart. Our life wasn't glamorous, but I cherished every heartbeat of it, packing lunchboxes with little love notes inside, brushing untidy hair before school, wiping sticky fingers after ice cream, and staying up late folding laundry while my husband tapped away at work emails. I reminded myself constantly that sacrifices were just proof of how deeply I cared. When people asked if I was happy, I would smile and say I was luckier than most, and I believed it. I had given up my teaching career willingly, choosing instead to focus entirely on motherhood, filling our home with laughter, warmth, and the smell of freshly baked bread. I loved watching my son run into his father's arms each evening and listening to their mismatched laughter echo down the hallway. Even when my husband's hours grew longer and his attention scattered like dry leaves in the wind, I dismissed my worries as passing storms. Men got busy. Love matured. Families adjusted. Once in a while he mentioned a colleague from work, Alia, spoken of with casual respect. She seemed harmless, someone who admired his professionalism, occasionally texting him quick updates. I never imagined anything beyond that. I didn't want to believe I had any reason to. My son occasionally mentioned her name as though she were part of a distant circle I had no need to enter. Aunt Alia said Daddy is very funny. He laughed once, spilling juice at the dinner table. I only smiled and wiped the mess, brushing away a faint discomfort that I didn't recognize as the earliest whisper of betrayal. I thought my vigilance kept us strong, family dinners even if one of us arrived late, weekend cart rides even when we were too tired to talk, bedtime stories read even on nights my throat felt raw. I poured every part of myself into nurturing the life we had built brick by brick over years of quiet devotion. My love was the sunlight in our morning rooms, the roof over our heads, the glue between our fingers. I told myself nothing could possibly go wrong because I did everything right. I thought being a good wife and mother was enough armor against life's unexpected blows. That belief carried me gently through every ordinary day, until one quiet afternoon, I picked my son up from school, expecting another soft, uneventful evening. I had no idea that in a matter of seconds, one single innocent sentence would shatter everything I thought I knew and expose a truth that would burn through the very heart of our home. The sun was bright that day, and my son skipped beside me swinging his school bag, humming a childish tune. I buckled him into the back seat as always, planning dinner in my head, thinking about nothing more serious than whether I had enough tomatoes left at home. I asked how his day was. He chattered happily about playground games and snacks, filling the car with his innocent joy. Halfway through a giggle, he blurted something that made my fingers tighten around the steering wheel. He said, "Mama, why did you never bring my pajamas when I sleep at Aunt Alia's house with Daddy?" I felt something sharp slice through my chest, not pain exactly, but a strange distortion of reality. I forced a calm tone and asked when they had done that. He blinked in confusion at my reaction and continued cheerfully. He told me Daddy usually carried him after they watched movies on Aunt Alia's big bed, adding that Daddy reminded him every time not to tell me because Mama gets worried too quickly. Each word felt like a drop of acid. I kept my face gentle so I wouldn't scare him. I asked what kind of games they played there. Without sensing anything wrong, he described how they ate pizza, watched cartoons, and sometimes he slept while Daddy and Aunt Alia sat in the living room kissing. My son's soft voice danced through the car while my heart plunged into something ugly and cold. I wanted to scream, but I smiled instead, nodding as if his story was nothing new. He seemed relieved not to disappoint me, unaware that he had accidentally cracked open a secret carefully hidden behind my back. I drove home in silence. Numb. My head buzzed while my body moved on autopilot. I cooked his favorite meal, answered his questions, bathed him, tucked him in with his favorite dinosaur tucked under one arm. All the while my mind replayed his every innocent word. I had never once imagined my husband could use our son as a shield. That was the betrayal within the betrayal. Not only was he being unfaithful, but he had dragged our child into the web of lies. That night I sat at the edge of my bed pretending to scroll through my phone as my husband came home later than usual. He kissed my forehead, acting normal, talking about traffic and deadlines. I watched him carefully, pretending to smile, pretending I hadn't found the crack in his perfect performance. My heart forged itself into stone while I played my part. I didn't question him. I didn't cry. I simply listened, storing every detail. The lying had become so natural to him, he didn't sense the shift in my eyes. He didn't see that I had stopped being his trusting wife in that moment and had become someone else entirely, someone who no longer believed in gentle assumptions, someone who needed hard truth more than comfort. I watched him fall asleep beside me, breathing evenly, unaware that the game was over. The next morning I rose before dawn, sitting quietly at the dining table with my tea untouched as though waiting for some kind of sign. But I already knew I needed proof, not whispers overheard from a child whose innocence had been weaponized. When my husband left for work, I kissed his cheek lightly, told him to have a good day, and then watched through the window as he drove away. Once he was gone, I moved with a calm I did not feel, opening drawers, checking pockets, searching places I had never before had a reason to. His laptop was locked, but his old phone lay forgotten in a desk drawer. I powered it up. The screen flickered to life. What I found inside changed something fundamental inside me forever. Hidden messages were still synced to an old chat backup, long threads of I miss yous, photos of meals they shared, stolen selfies of them lying close together in bed, sometimes with my son's blurry hand waving in the background. I scrolled until my hands began to shake, reading words that made my stomach twist, promises of a future once things settle down, jokes about how easily I believed his stories, and instructions on how to keep their little buddy happy so he wouldn't ask to see me while they were together. Tears slipped down my face without sound. I felt foolish, humiliated, violated. How deeply had he underestimated my love that he believed I would never uncover this? And how cruelly had he abused my trust to turn our child into an unwitting accomplice? I wiped my face dry, closed the phone carefully, and waited for him to return. That evening, when he walked through the door and placed his keys in the bowl at the entrance, I asked him softly if he loved me. He looked surprised at the question, nodded, walked forward to hug me. I stepped back before he could touch me and asked if he loved Alia. His face drained of color, mouth opening and closing like a fish dragged out of water. I saw panic, excuses forming behind his tongue, lies gathering like crows. I told him I already knew. I told him our son had spoken. At that, something hardened in me beyond repair. He began to babble apologies, reaching for my hands frantically, talking about stress, loneliness, confusion, how it had just happened. I stared at him as if he were a stranger who had wandered accidentally into my house wearing my husband's face. When he realized I was not going to forgive him immediately, his voice shifted from pleading to defensive. He said I had neglected our marriage by focusing too much on our child. That I had stopped dressing up, stopped surprising him. The words clanged inside me like metal on metal. He twisted blame like a knife, but I would not bleed in front of him. I reminded him I had sacrificed with love, not convenience. I told him what he had broken could not be mended with flowers and solace. Our son appeared at the bedroom door, eyes sleepy, asking if we were arguing. I immediately swallowed my sobs and whispered we were talking about something grown-ups talk about. I cradled him close, feeling his warm cheek against my chest, while my husband stood a few feet away looking helpless. At that moment I realized I could never let this man, who so easily used lies and secrets, make decisions for my heart again. For the next few days, the house moved around me like a slow-motion dream. I woke up before my son each morning, packed his lunch, braided his hair, ironed his uniform, just as I always had. I whispered gentle encouragements and blew kisses as he waved goodbye from the school gate. But inside me something vital had shifted. I spoke little to my husband beyond necessary words. We shared the same roof but not the same world anymore. He tried to resume ordinary routines, complimenting my cooking, sending me predictable good morning messages, leaving notes on the fridge, but the old spell was broken. Everything he did felt scripted, desperate, and soaked in guilt. I began contemplating something unimaginable only weeks earlier, a life without him. I watched the calendar of my heart flip forward. He begged me every night to talk properly, promised to end it with Alia, swore he would block her everywhere, get transfer papers, make anything right. He cried some nights, tears darkening his pillow. I watched in silence, astonished by how unaffected I felt by his sorrow. Perhaps I had already mourned the end of us when I first read those messages. Maybe my heart had already buried the marriage the moment I realized my son had been turned into a tiny keeper of dangerous secrets. I told him calmly that choosing me now meant nothing, because he had already chosen someone else when he still had me. He asked for a second chance. I replied that this wasn't his second mistake, but the final one that mattered. One afternoon while my son was at school, I met Alia outside her office building. She looked startled at first, then instantly ashamed. She tried to speak, but I raised a hand gently and told her there was nothing she could say that I needed to hear. I simply said that whatever fantasy she thought she was living would end right here, because my son's future would never again be dragged into their lies. I thanked her softly for exposing my husband's true nature, because now I could stop wasting years pretending my love would protect me from betrayal. She didn't respond. She just stared as I walked away with my head high, feeling clearer than I had in months. The next morning, I placed an envelope containing separation papers on my husband's bedside table. He read them with trembling hands and stared at me in disbelief. I explained calmly that I was not choosing revenge, only peace. I told him I could forgive many things, neglect, boredom, mistakes, but I could never forgive being made blind to protect their convenience, never forgive my son learning how to lie to his mother before he even lost his baby teeth. I told him I wanted custody, stability, freedom from games. He cried again, begged again, but this time I walked away with my son's backpack in hand, ready to take him to school, ready to begin living honestly again. People tell me I am brave, but I don't feel brave. I feel honest. I feel lighter. Some nights I lie awake and remember a time when we were a family complete, but then I remember the child who trusted me enough to speak a truth that changed everything. He never meant to hurt me. He simply saved me in the only language he knew, honesty. And so I hold him close each night and whisper promises I intend to keep, that our home will be a place with no secrets, that love will never be used as a weapon, and that betrayal, once discovered, will never again be allowed to bloom. In the morning I wake, pack his lunch, and build our life anew, not with blind belief in another person, but with fierce belief in myself, the woman who chose dignity over deception the day her son unknowingly crossed a boundary that changed everything.